Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are back in War Thunder looking at another devblog for update 1.93, and this time we're having a look at the ZTZ96. This is going to be the new top tier Chinese vehicle that is coming to the game. It is a vast improvement over some of its brothers that we already have in the tech tree, and may I just say it is incredibly wonderful to see another Chinese vehicle in the Chinese tech tree. One of the most interesting things about the Chinese tech tree, and what made me optimistic about it at certain points, was the fact that when you look at the planned and the soon ideas, eventually we're going to get some nice Chinese vehicles. The Type 59-2, Type 79, of course the ZTZ96, which is this one, and some of the AAs as well. What also makes me hope that we're going to see more Chinese vehicles this update is since the ZTZ96 is labeled as soon, some of these others are also labeled as soon. So the ZSD23 with the dual 23mm, the STKFC 2222, and then of course the PG something or other, and of course the Duster, the CM25 Tow. So it would be nice to see them in this update as well, and eventually get some more of these MBTs from China rolling about. So how is the ZTZ different to its predecessors? Well, the first major thing is it has access to a 125mm. This 125mm is fully stabilized, and it also has on top of it the fact that it is auto-loaded. This reduces the crew in the vehicle to 3. 2 in the turret and a driver, and also it makes it so it can fire 7.5 rounds per minute. That equals about a reload rate of 8 seconds, which is very standard for a machine of its caliber. It's able to fire stuff like Apfsds, just like every other machine at its BR, and on top of this as well, it does have a nice machine gun on the top of it. They actually showed it on the Russian stream today, and we'll make sure to go through that in a little bit, but the counterparts that they compare it to, at least in the Devblog, is the Soviet T-72. Now for me, the major difference between the T-72 and this is unfortunately the ZTZ. Even though it has a good gun, it has pretty good armor, the speed is just not there. This machine has an engine which is 730 horsepower, and it can only go 57 kilometers an hour, and the main issue is only 9 kilometers an hour in reverse. Now, because of the fact that at top tier, or high tiers, the BRs have gone up to 10.3 now, the general meta is very fast vehicles, being able to get to positions quickly, play quite defensively, and stand out and be able to pick people off as they move with help of their thermals and with help of other factors. The problem with the ZTZ is it's not going to be able to do this because it lacks that, flat-out acceleration that a lot of the European MBTs and even the T80U is able to grant itself. The armor on the vehicle is also of composite origin. It has some armor on its hull and also its turret, and the ZTZ96's armor can absorb around 350 to 380 millimeters of penetration against kinetic and 580 to 600 millimeters of penetration against chemical. I'm sure, as all of the top tier MBTs have, it will have some form of weakness in the form of its front, whether it is this very, very small turret ring, the breach, or maybe its lower glacis. We'll have to see when the vehicle hits the dev server, which I'm pretty sure will happen pretty soon. But what it's looking like to me is a Chinese vehicle which is very similar to the Soviet style of vehicle, and as a person who has been enjoying the T-72 in the game, I am happy to see it. But the main thing I'm happy about is the fact that it's Chinese. The other factor, when we actually look at it on the live stream, to point out is its gun depression. So it's -6 gun depression, which is not standard. 10 degrees of gun depression is what you're really looking for to be a competent, MBT. 6 degrees is not great. 8 degrees you can get away with, but unfortunately 6 degrees is not the best. The fact that this machine also has a 12.7mm on the top is nice. It will be able to deal with lightly armored targets, and also it will be able to deal with some other targets which you can find, including some stuff such as helicopters and aircraft, or airplanes, which are going to be flying around the place at pretty decent licks. The other thing to also note about the machine is its modifications. So if we pause it here, you can see it starts off stock with a HeatFS shell. It gets access to a HE shell and also an Apfsds. The Apfsds, at least on the test server, was a rank 4 modification, which is, well, it's not the best, is it? It also had access to night vision, no thermals on this machine, and also a laser rangefinder. It has access to ESS, smoke grenades, and all of the nice bells and whistles, but the problem is the fact that it doesn't have thermals and it doesn't have great optics on this machine really lets it down. So having a look at the Apfsds, you can see it's like around about 470, 460 millimeters at 0, and then unfortunately, as you can see, the Twitter thing is covering it, but at least at 100 it's 464, 402, 268, and right now this is seen as a rank 6 vehicle at 9.7. So this is going to get into a lot of matches which are 10.3 or 10.0, which are pretty much going to maul it. The main issue with vehicles like this, a lot of people, if they've played top tier Soviet MBTs, will tell you how annoying it is to have the carousel autoloader, because what happens is people will, they'll front wheel you, which means that when the vehicle is like this, they'll shoot you here, it'll go through and it'll hit the carousel and make the whole thing blow up. Also, the fact that you only have 3 crew in the first place makes it so you are less survivable, and you have to try and rely on your lower silhouette to be able to deal with stuff. And for me, when I look at the ZTZ96, it doesn't have as low silhouette as some of the Soviet MBTs that we see in the game. I will say that the camouflage that is currently on the ZTZ96 is really nice. This, in my opinion, is the best camouflage in the game when it comes to just a standard stock camouflage which you can get for GE. I really like this one on top of everything else. Another thing to also mention is if you move your mouse in a loading screen, the loading screen actually moves now, which is really cool, and that's definitely a new thing. So here it is in the test server, and it does get up to speed at a decent lick, it's a decent pace, but it is nothing compared to the MBTs that it's going to be fighting. You can also see that it's quite chunky on the back, very, very high engine deck, so gun depression is going to be pretty useless from the back. I also don't believe this thing has dual drive, so it's going to have to really get going before it's going to turn really well. And also, one thing to point out, its optics, at least on the test server, it was only 3 times. So most optics at top tier normally go from like 8 to 12 times. This only went up to 3 times. So unless that is changed, it's going to be very hard to hit anything from any distance with this machine. So you can see it has a lot of limiting factors to it, but it does have some good stuff. The armor, which hopefully if it gets downtied a lot will be useful. The gun itself will be easily good enough to be able to deal with anything it fights. And also with the fact that, eventually we're going to get more of these top tier Chinese vehicles, it should fill out a really lovely lineup at the end of the day. But the downsides of the lack of reverse, the struggling acceleration, the no thermals, which for me is a large one, especially with the current meta at top tier, and also the lack of gun depression and the carousel idea means that this thing, I don't think it will be meta. I think it's nice to see, but when we compare it to the vehicles that it should be compared against, the Soviets and the other European MBTs, it's going to fall short. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Mopar 1969, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyans Terry, and eLoveGoats, and of course Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.